So, how does real change actually happen in America? Is it this place where passionate movements go to die, kind of like a graveyard of good intentions? Or is it more like a garden, where those same ideas actually plant seeds for the future? We're going to dive into a really fascinating debate today that uses these two powerful metaphors to get right to the heart of that question. Okay, so you've probably heard this phrase before, right? The graveyard of empires. It's this idea that huge, powerful forces, we're talking the British, the Soviets, even the US, they all march into Afghanistan and just get bogged down. They get defeated. The country just waits them out. It's this incredibly powerful image of, this deep, immovable resistance. And here is where it gets really interesting. What if we took that graveyard idea, but applied it not to foreign armies, but to America's own social movements? The core argument here, and it's a pretty provocative one, is that the country has this weird, uncanny ability to take in all that energy from reformers, exhaust them, and in the end, just neutralize even the most passionate calls for change from within.
All right, so how on earth does that comparison even work? Let's break down what's being called the graveyard argument. It draws this direct and honestly pretty startling parallel between how Afghanistan outlasts empires and how American culture seems to do the same thing to its own reformers.
And this slide just lays the whole analogy out perfectly. Look on the left. Afghanistan's strategy isn't about winning a big flashy war. It's about patience. It's about absorbing resources, maybe seeming to comply, and then, as soon as the invader's energy fades, everything just snaps back. Now look at the right. The argument is that American culture does the exact same thing to its own movements. It soaks up all the funding, all the attention, all the passion, until the movement runs out of steam, and then the old ways just quietly creep back in. So you might be asking, why would this happen? Well, the author of this idea points to two concepts borrowed straight from physics. First up is inertia. Like a giant boulder, a culture just doesn't want to move. It resists change. It takes this enormous, nonstop effort to get it going. And then there's entropy. This is just the natural tendency of things to fall apart, to go from order back to chaos. So once that initial blast of energy from a movement fades, entropy kicks in, and all those new systems and rules just start to decay. And to make this case, the source points to a whole bunch of recent movements, things like Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, all the DEI initiatives, even things like the trans rights campaigns or COVID lockdowns. The argument is that if you look closely, they all follow the same pattern. This huge, explosive surge of energy at the beginning, then you get some surface-level compliance from big institutions, they change their logos, they issue statements, but then, as the energy fades, there's this quiet rollback. Inertia just takes over again. Okay, but let's be honest, that whole graveyard idea is pretty bleak, right? It's no surprise that it prompted a really powerful counter-argument, with a completely different and way more optimistic metaphor. This one isn't about burying things, it's about growing them. And this quote right here, this really gets to the heart of it. It just completely flips the script. The idea here isn't that America outlasts movements. No, it's that America evolves by outlasting the cynicism, the belief that change can't happen in the first place. And that brings us to this beautiful counter-metaphor, compost. The idea is that movements don't just die and get buried in a graveyard. They compost. They break down, for sure, but in doing so, they enrich the soil, the cultural soil, making it more fertile for the next wave of reform. So in this view, what looks like a failure is actually just preparation. And you can see the two ideas clash directly in this table. I mean, they're looking at the exact same phenomena, but coming to totally opposite conclusions. For the graveyard view, inertia is the enemy. It guarantees failure. But for the compost view, inertia is actually a good thing, kind of like a safety mechanism for democracy. Or look at backlash. The graveyard folks say, see, proof it failed. The compost folks say, no way, that's proof it was having a real impact. It's a completely different way of seeing the world. Okay, so what happens next is really cool. The original author, the one who came up with the graveyard idea, is faced with this really compelling compost argument. And they don't just retreat. Instead, they take that criticism on board and refine their idea into something new, something even more nuanced that tries to bring both perspectives together. And that leads us to this. What a striking, totally modern image. America isn't a graveyard. It's a mausoleum with Wi-Fi. Think about it. A mausoleum is different from a graveyard, right? Things aren't just buried and forgotten. They're preserved. They're put on display. They're admired. And that with Wi-Fi part, that's the crucial modern twist. These ideas are kept digitally alive, always connected, always visible. So what does that mean exactly? It means movements aren't destroyed, but they're not really composted either. They're preserved. They get put behind glass. They're turned into hashtags. They get celebrated in corporate mission statements. And of course, they get monetized. All of this creates what the author calls the illusion of vitality without life. It looks alive, but it's not actually breathing.
This is such a key point. The system doesn't have to crush dissent to defeat it anymore. It just absorbs it. It metabolizes it. It takes the raw, powerful energy of a protest and turns it into marketable brand content. So feminism becomes empowerment branding on a t-shirt. Environmentalism becomes a new app to track your carbon footprint. The outrage itself is turned into a product you can sell.
So after all this, graveyards, compost, mausoleums, it brings us right back to the big, central question at the heart of this whole debate. When progress happens, what does it actually look like? What does it feel like over the long haul? And this might be the best way to boil it all down. Is American progress a spiral, or is it a treadmill? Are we on a spiral, constantly moving upward, even if we circle back and revisit old fights from a higher level? Or are we on a treadmill, just running faster and faster? The scenery around us is always updating, but we're not actually going anywhere.
Let's break that down. The spiral, that's the optimistic compost view. It says, yeah, we might be fighting the same battles over and over, but each time we're at a higher altitude. Progress builds on itself. It's cumulative. Then you've got the treadmill. That's the more skeptical, mausoleum view. It suggests we're just stuck in this loop, this constant churn that just wears us out without any real forward movement. Sure, the tech changes, the slow bins get an update, but the deep down power structures, they stay exactly the same.
So where does that leave us? Well, in the end, maybe the answer isn't about picking a side. Graveyard or garden, spiral or treadmill. The source material kind of concludes that the real sign of a healthy republic isn't a final victory for either the optimists or the cynics. It's the debate itself. It's that constant tension, that pull between those who believe we're on a spiral and those who are terrified we're on a treadmill. That's the space where democracy really lives, where it argues with itself, and where it keeps breathing.